Hi, this is Ellie from TechPlay Customer Support. How may I help you today, Nathan?
Hey, I'm looking to check on an order that I placed last week.
Sure thing, Nathan. Let me pull up your orders. Got it. Please hang tight for just a moment while I check that for you. All right, Nathan, I see two orders here. One for an Apple MacBook Air M2, order ID 12346, and another for an Apple Watch Series 9, order ID 12357. Which one would you like me to check the status of?
The MacBook, please.
Got it. Your MacBook Air M2 is currently in transit and at the Chicago IL Sorting Center. The expected delivery date is February 28th, but there's a slight delay due to a snowstorm in the area. Let me know if you need help with anything else.
Oh, really? I mean that
Yeah,
probably doesn't work for me because yeah, I actually expected it much earlier than that. Can I get a refund for that, please? Then
I'm sorry to hear that, Nathan. Just to confirm, this is for the order number 12346, correct?
that is correct. Yes, the MacBook.
Got it. Could you share a bit more about why the delay doesn't work for you? Are you needing it urgently for something specific?
Yeah, I bought it for my wife's birthday, and yeah, now with that delivery date is gonna be later than that, so I don't want it anymore.
Ah, I see. That makes sense, Nathan. Let me go ahead and process the refund for you. Please hang tight for just a moment. Please wait a moment while I take care of that for you. All right, Nathan, I've processed the refund for your MacBook order. The amount will be returned to your original payment method, and you'll get a confirmation email at hna6300@gmail.com shortly. Let me know if there's anything else I can help you with.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Glad I could help, Nathan. If you need anything else, just give us a shout. Have a great day.
All right, thanks. What you have just seen is an AI voice agent built for an e-commerce business. This system will know exactly who is calling via their phone number from the system, and then it can automatically help pull up their ongoing orders without them having to provide any order information. And then if the customer would like, it can also automatically help process refund requests depending on whether the reason was justified or not, based on the criteria and instructions given by the business of what is acceptable for refund versus what is not. And then once the refund is processed, it will update the CRM, as you can see here, adding another entry to the refund table. And then it can also send a confirmation email of the refund to the customer using their email address that we didn't have to ask for, but it actually came directly from the CRM. And even though I'm using Google Sheets as the CRM example in this case to manage customer information, orders information, and refunds information, in reality, this system can be easily integrated into any existing CRM for e-commerce, just like Shopify, using an API and automation platforms like Make.com. And unlike previous AI voice agents that I have built in the past using only text-based system prompts, this AI voice agent was built using probably the coolest feature that I have seen in the AI voice agent space for a while: Retell AI Conversation Flow. How reliable are AI voice agents? That is the number one question that I got from businesses who are looking to adopt this new technology. And it is a valid concern because, unlike traditional software, AI systems, especially those dependent on generative AI and LLM, is not deterministic. This can be a risk to businesses who are looking to adopt this new system because of that level of uncertainty. Imagine hiring a customer service rep who can sometimes get questions wrong or do the wrong things in a conversation with a customer, right? We wouldn't want that, and the same applies to AI. This is exactly why I was super excited when Retell AI released their new feature Conversation Flow, which is a workflow builder that allows us to create multiple notes within the agent to handle different scenarios in the conversation. It helps provide us with more fine-grained control over the conversation flow compared to just specifying everything in a single prompt. And as you just seen in the demo, as the conversation progresses, the system will seamlessly transition between the different nodes, right? Keeping the conversation still natural while give us a lot more control over what exactly happens at each stage of the conversation. By the end of this video, you will learn how to build an AI voice agent using Conversation Flow in Retell AI, and also how to integrate that with external systems using an automation platform like Make.com. And as usual, I will leave you with all of the resources for free if you would like to build it for yourself. Ready? Let's get into it. As the AI voice agent space evolves, both in terms of the technology as well as the business adoption, I think we are seeing a significant shift in how these agents are being built. In the early days, building an AI voice agent often meant just using a single prompt like what you are seeing here, right? And we would give the language model all of the necessary instructions up front, everything it might need to know to carry out the conversation. This approach works quite well for straightforward, short interactions where the agent doesn't need to juggle too many different tasks or contexts. So an example of this would be a receptionist for a dental office, right? So their job is pretty simple, just greet the patient, get the basic information like their name, their preferred time, the issue they are facing, and a single prompt is likely sufficient in this case because the process is quite linear and predictable. However, as the conversation itself becomes more complex, this approach revealed some limitations. When the agents have to handle more dynamic interactions, the single prompt became a bit cumbersome to build and to maintain, and also error prone as well, since the model had to process the entire instruction set, the entire prompt at every turn, like trying to find a specific book while being handed the entire library each time. And so to address these challenges, developers began to introduce multiple prompts to break the conversation down into logical modules. Each module would focus on a specific part of the conversation, and the agent transitions between these modules based on predefined conditions. Right, so this structure would gives us more control over the conversation flow and allows the agent to manage more extended and complex interactions more reliably. So for example, you can imagine a virtual real estate agent, right? This agent can greet the callers and then recommend the properties based on their preferences, schedule the tour if a property is available, or follow up with more options later if the requested ones are unavailable. And so with a multi-prompt setup like this, each of these tasks is handled by its own dedicated module, ensuring that the agent knows exactly what to focus on at any given time. This modular approach really reduces the confusion for the language module because the agent only needs to process the instructions relevant to its current task instead of having to sift through the entire conversational logic at every turn. And following that same principle, we have arrived at Conversation Flow, which is a workflow builder where the LLM is guided step by step with explicit instructions at each phase of the conversation. And in this setup, the model isn't just relying on static preset modules, but can dynamically adjust based on real-time context and user input. So for example, what you've just seen me demo earlier is a customer service rep for an e-commerce business, right? The conversation could go many directions depending on what the customer says, like checking an order status, processing refund, handling billing issues, gathering feedback, or escalating to a human agent if necessary. With a conversation flow setup like this, the AI will receive the precise instructions relevant to the current context, ensuring that it can respond appropriately regardless of how the conversation unfolds. And we can see this evolution very clearly in Retell AI, which transitioned from a single prompt setup to multi-prompt modules and now conversation flow for more nuanced and reliable interactions. But this pattern isn't exclusive to Retell, it's just a natural progression in the AI voice agent space as a whole, I believe. And the key principle here is simple. The more focused the instructions are at each phase of the conversation, the more consistent and reliable the agent will become. By narrowing the model's attention to what matters most at each given moment, we reduce the confusion, we improve the accuracy, and create a smoother experience for users on the other end of the call. A quick note here, I have created tutorials on building AI voice agents with both the single prompt setup and the multi-prompt setup in Retell. So if you are curious to see these approaches in action and how they're different compared to the conversation flow, check out the videos that I left in the description below. Okay, now let's look at how we can build an AI voice agent using conversation flow in Retell AI. So first of all, just like with any other agent, to create one, you can click on the create an agent button on the top right hand side corner here. And here you can see the different options, including conversation flow agent, which is currently in beta since the feature is only recently released. And here for tasks with complex transitions. And as we click on this option, you have the option to start from blank, but you also have the options to start with a few template of common use cases that Retell had created for us here. So patient screening, real estate lead qualification, medical receptionist, and so on. So all very common use cases. And yeah, I think it's all these are very good starting points for you to start building with conversation flow, especially since the feature is quite new and the mechanisms to build with conversation flow is slightly different compared to what we have been used to in Retell with single prompt and multi-prompt. In this case, I have already created an AI voice agent using a conversation flow, so I'm just going to use this example to show you guys exactly how it works. Okay, so this is what conversation flow looks like in Retell AI. On the right hand side, you can find all the global settings that will be applied universally across all the nodes that we define in the conversation flow. And if you have built an AI voice agent in Retell before using single prompt or multi-prompt setup, you are probably already familiar with these settings. So for example, we have the language selection, the voice selection, the global LLM that the voice agent will use to generate the response. And keep this in mind because it will be important once we talk about the ability to actually override this LLM in specific nodes. And then down here we have the global system prompt. Basically this the instructions and context that apply to the agent regardless of where it is in the conversation. So things like its role, its overall task, and any universal instructions that we have for it. As well as here, I also specify the information about the user that we retrieve from the CRM. And then after that, we have the knowledge base, speech settings, call settings, post-call analysis, security settings, webhook, and so on. So these are all global settings that we can set for the AI voice agents, regardless of which phase, which turn of the conversation it's in. And over here, we also have a tab for testing as well, also the same as other agents in Retell. We can test the LLM, which means that we can talk to the AI voice agent, but only with text inputs and outputs. And here you will notice that as we speak to the voice agent and we proceed in the conversation, the current node here will be updated to which node the voice agent is being in right now. And now if I progress the conversation, say I'd like a refund, you will see the current node being updated to the current state, the current phase of the conversation that the AI and the user is in right now, which is refund requested, and it also being highlighted here, which is pretty neat. And then you can also actually test by speaking with the voice agent directly, which is what I did in the demo by clicking test here, and you can just talk to it. Hello.
Hi, this is Ellie from TechPlay Customer Support. How may I help you today, Nathan?
Hey, I would like to request a refund for an order.
I'm sorry to hear that, Nathan. Could you please share the order ID for the purchase you'd like to refund?
Something like that, right? And you can also see the refund requested node being highlighted here during testing. And then now, if we look to the left-hand side panel, we will see the different types of nodes that we can use to define the conversation flow. And I think it's important that before we get into the conversation flow itself, we understand what types of notes are available at our disposal and how to use them. First, we have the conversation note, which is the most commonly used note type in the conversation flow. And yeah, as the name suggests, it's used to have a conversation with the user. Then we have the function note, which is used to basically call a function. So what we used to do in the prompt, saying things like call check availability function, right? Now we can use this note to do that in a more structured and accurate way. And then we have the call transfer note, which is used to transfer the call to a human in certain situation that we think would require the attention of a real human. Then we have press digit, which is really used more to navigate IVR. Probably not as common for most of the projects that you guys are going to work on. And then finally, we have the ending note, which is used to end the call. And for all these types of notes, Retell had created very comprehensive documentations on how each of them work, as well as the best practice on how to use them. I will include the link to the documentation in the description for you to use as reference. But now we can dive into the actual conversation flow of the e-commerce customer rep AI voice agent that I built, so that we can really see how these different types of notes work together in practice. Okay, so first we have the begin note here, and it doesn't do much, but we do have to set a few settings here. So we can decide who speaks first, whether it's the AI or whether it's the user. We can also set a period of pause for the AI before it starts to speak. So this is to prevent the case where perhaps the user on the other line is not ready for the conversation yet and the AI already started to speak. And so if we want to avoid that, if we know that scenario can happen, we can set this period here to a few seconds. In normal cases though, I find it to not be that necessary. And then next, in my case, we have the first note, which is basically the welcome note. And so basically here we are simply saying hi to the user, and we are using the user's name that we got from the CRM. So that's why when you hear the agent speaks to me in the demo, it says, "How may I help you today, Nathan?" Right? And this is a dynamic variable that we can inject at the time of the call. I will show you later how exactly we can get this information from the CRM into the AI voice agent. But here, as you can see, I'm setting this as a static sentence as opposed to a prompt. And this is an option that you can select depending on the specific conversation, the specific thing that the agent is supposed to say at this stage. So here it's a simple greeting, so I'm just going to leave it as a static sentence, and then from the greeting, depending on what the user wants to do, we will transition them into any of the specific path that they can take. So in this case, there are basically three possible paths that the user can take, that the conversation can go into. First, the user can ask to check on an existing order, which the conversation will go into this path. So what I'm calling a path here is actually a conversation node that will continue helping the user to check on their order. But you can see here that I'm setting it as a global node. So this basically means is that this node can be accessible at any stage of the conversation. So as Retell is saying here, it allows any other nodes to come to this node without any edges having to be defined. So here you can see that I'm specifying the condition for when this node or this path should be transitioned to, right? So if the user wants to check on the status of their orders, right, then we go into this node. And then the second path that the user can go into is if they want to request a refund. And here I also set that as a global node, but with a different condition. So only jump to this node when the user needs to initiate a refund of a purchase. And then finally, I have another global node that basically means a fallback path for the user to go into if they have any support issues that are not related to order status or refund, right? So having these three paths like this, two specific paths that I know can handle very common request types for this business, which is checking orders and processing refunds. and then having a final fallback node here that handles any other types of request. This will help me basically handle all types of issues that the user can come up with when they talk to the AI voice agent. So now let's look into the detail of what exactly happens in each of these paths. So if the user wants to check on their orders, then we will say that, okay, we will help pull up the information for them. And here I'm still using a static sentence since it's a relatively simple thing to say. You can notice here though that enabling skip response, and this basically means that after saying this sentence, the AI will automatically jump to the next node without waiting for the user to respond. And this makes sense for this step of the conversation, because here we're just informing the user that, okay, we are going to look up their orders for them. We don't need any other extra input from them, and so we can skip the response here. However, if I don't turn this on, if I turn this off, right, then we will require a response, some kind of input from the user in order to move forward. And I will show that in subsequent nodes. Okay, so after this step, we are saying that we are going to pull up the orders, and then we will transition immediately to the second node, which is the function node. Here, basically calling the function to get the orders information based on the user's phone number. And so here you can see a few things worth noting here. First, most importantly, the function. So here we can select for this function node, which function are we actually calling? And in this case, we are calling get orders, which is a function that I already defined here. And the way that the custom function works in Conversation Flow is exactly the same as other agents in Retell. You specify the name of the function, the description, the webhook URL where you want to send the request to, and then defining the parameters that we are sending with this request. And besides the custom function, we can also choose to use built-in functions that Retell has, which in this case would be integrated functions with cow.com to check calendar availability or booking an event on the calendar. And then we can enable the option for the AI to speak during the execution of the function. And so what this basically means is that if we suspect that the function might take a while to be completed, then we can allow the AI to say something to the user in the meantime to keep them waiting. So for example, here I'm just telling the user that please wait a moment while we pull up that information, and the AI would say that. And then we can also enable the wait for result setting, which basically telling the AI to wait for the function to finish before transitioning to the next node. So by enabling this, we are making sure that the function has completed successfully and that we get the data back that we need in order to carry on with the conversation. And then here we are defining the transition for when we should move on to the next step of the conversation, which in this case, okay, we are supposed to retrieve the orders info from the user. So if we call the function and we manage to really retrieve the orders information, then we will move on to the next step of the conversation. So now that we have the information about any ongoing orders that the user is having, we are going to basically read back to them what those ongoing orders are. And here you can see that I'm actually not using a static sentence anymore, because the content for this step of the conversation is actually more nuanced and more complicated. So here I'm simply providing the AI with the general instructions of how it should carry out this step in the conversation. So just like when we provide this instruction in the prompt, we would do the same thing here. The only difference is that it is now in a specific node. So the AI only needs to focus on this specific instructions at this step. And so here I'm telling the AI to read back to the users their ongoing orders in a natural and conversational way. We are telling the AI to only use the order ID and the product name to keep it brief and natural, since the way the function works is going to return all this information about the order. And so if we don't provide any extra instructions here, the AI is just going to provide all of the information about the orders, which will make the sentence really long and not the way a real conversation happens at all. And then the AI would ask the user which of the orders they would like to check the status for in case that they have multiple orders. Like the example that I had two ongoing orders, which is the MacBook Air and the Apple Watch. So which one do you want to check the status and the detail of? And once the user confirms which order they want to check the status for, then we can move on to the next stage where we will share with them the detail of that order that they selected. And the great thing about this is that we only need to say for the selected order, and the AI already has context about what that selected order is and all the information that we have gathered in the previous step. So if you remember, in the previous step, we retrieved the order's info, right? And then we asked the user which order they want to check the status for, right? So the AI already has all that information already from calling the function, and also from asking the user, okay, which order do you want to check for? And so because of that, in this stage, it already has all of the context it needs in order to just read out, okay, for this order that you selected, this is the order status, this is the current info, this is the current location, the expected delivery, shipping issue if any. And so one important thing to note about the conversation node here is that the AI and the user can actually have a multi-turn conversation inside one single node. So we don't necessarily need to create a new conversation node for every sentence that the agent needs to say. So for example, here, after we share the order status with the user, if they want to ask for any other information about the order, they can do that while still staying within this node. So if they keep asking for, okay, where is my order, when it is going to arrive, those are multiple multiple sentences that the user and the AI will interact with each other, but it's still going to stay within this node. And so that's why when we define the transition for this node, we will define it as if the user has no more questions, then we will move on to the next step, meaning that as long as they still have questions about the order and they keep asking for more information about the order, we are going to stay in this node. And so in a normal situation, if everything is fine, the user is just checking to see where their order is and there's no issue, they would have no more questions about it, and then we would proceed to the next node, the next step of the conversation, which is we would end the conversation, and then it would lead to the final end node here, right? But in the specific scenario that I demoed for you guys, because the order is late due to a snowstorm, the user wants to initiate a refund for this order, right? So here I said, okay, it doesn't work for me, can I get the refund for that, please? Right? So when I say that, can I get a refund for that, please? Remember that we already defined a global node, a global path for refunding orders, right? And if you remember, in this global node, we define the condition for this node as the user needs to initiate a refund for a purchase, then we will jump immediately to this node. And that is exactly what happened if we look at the conversation here. So as soon as I said, can I get a refund for that, please? The system was able to pick up on that intention, and then it was able to transition the user to the refund requested node, which is what I defined right here. And so here I'm providing the instructions for the AI on how to handle that refund. So say that we're sorry to hear that, and ask the user for the order ID that they want the refund for. Now in this case, as you notice, right, we already know what order they are talking about. So I provide an instruction here saying that if it's for an order that is already mentioned in the conversation, just do not ask again and simply confirm whether it is the right order that they are looking to refund for, right? So with these instructions, we make sure that we can handle refund in both the cases where the user just call up and ask for a refund. In that case, we don't have any information about which order they're referring to, so we're going to need to ask for the order ID. But also in this case, if the user is already having a conversation about an order with the AI and they want a refund, then the AI already has context about which order it is, and it can use that to make the conversation smarter and more natural. And so in this case, because of these instructions, you can see that instead of asking the user for the order ID, it simply confirm, okay, this is the order you are talking about, right? This is the order that you want us to refund you for, right? And then the user simply has to confirm it in order for the conversation to proceed to the next stage, which we will ask for the reason why they would like to be refunded for the order. And here I'm telling the AI to gather as much detail as possible to determine whether the refund is justified or not. And we see that in practice here, right? So, it's asking the user to share a little bit more about why they want the refund, and is asking for this information to then decide whether the refund is justifiable or not, right? And so in this case, we are building an agent that can automatically handle refund requests that are obvious, that are simple enough to handle. And so we are defining two possible transitions here, two possible scenarios here that can happen with this refund, right? So either the refund reason is reasonable, and in that case, we are going to accept that refund and process it for them, or the refund reason is not reasonable, and in that case we say that we are going to need to review it, and we simply transfer the call to a supervisor. So here, in order to help fine-tune the AI to know which refund reason is justifiable versus what is not, we can use fine-tuning examples. So here we can specifically add the example for the AI to know if the user says certain things, then I should transition to this scenario. Whereas if the user say other things, then I should transition to a different scenario. And in this case, the two different scenarios are refund being accepted versus refund needed to be reviewed. And so here I'm saying that, okay, so for example, if the product is damaged, and I'm giving this one example here, then you should accept the refund request, right? And I can provide as many examples as I like here in order to really fine-tune the AI to know how to transition to different states, like receiving the wrong product, or here the order being late. And after we provide what the user said, we can select, okay, what scenario it is. In this case, if the user said this, we want to transition to this node, right? Whereas the other case, which is the refund reason is not really acceptable, it's not really justified, like for example, if they found another place where they can get the product for cheaper, but they already placed the order. So in this case, the business considers that not really justifiable, so we will pass this case to the human to deal with, right? And we can provide a bunch of examples here for this case as well. If the user said this, then we transition them to this node in order to really help the AI determine how they should handle the transition from this node to various possible nodes that it can go to. And so with that, if the refund reason is decided to be acceptable, which in this case, because the order is late, it is considered acceptable, it transitions into refund accepted, where we simply saying to the user that we will process their refund request and ask them to wait while I process the refund. So this is actually a good example of where we can override the universal LLM. So if you remember, we set the global LLM for this whole agent to be GPT-4o, right? But in the cases, in the specific nodes, in the specific step of the conversation where it's actually simple, there's no processing, there's no decision making here, and we simply want the AI to say something, and it's not exactly a static sentence, we still want some variety. We can actually override the global LLM to some other model, in this case a cheaper and faster model in GPT-4o mini, since we know that the processing in this step is very simple, so we would rather it to be quicker and cheaper. I find this to be a very handy feature because now we have very fine-grained control over which model we can use for the specific node in a conversation flow. And since the choice of the model can be overridden within individual nodes, the pricing for each call is actually calculated based on how many seconds spent within each node times the model price per second for that node, aggregated across all the nodes. So if you don't override any model, then the price for each minute would be exactly the price that you see up here, which is 12 cents. But if you do override the model to be, for example, in this case, cheaper than the global model, right? Then any time spent in this node would actually be cheaper than any time spent in other nodes that are still using GPT-4o. Yeah, I find this to be a very great feature to have. And then after informing the user that their refund is accepted, we simply go ahead and call the function to actually refund the order for the user here. And here is a simple function. We basically send the ID of the order to be refunded, as well as the reason for the refund. And then depending on whether any errors or issues happen at the refunding step, we will handle those scenarios accordingly. So if the refund is unsuccessful, something might go wrong with the system, then we tell user that there is some technical issues and we are going to transfer that call for the human to take over. Whereas if the refund is successful, then we tell user that their order is already refunded to the original method of payment, and they will receive a confirmation via their email. And so here again, using a dynamic variable to inject the email that we have of the user from the CRM in order to automatically send the confirmation email without the user having to provide that information again, without the AI having to ask for that information again, and without the user having to provide that information. I think this is a very useful trick to perform if we do have information about the user from the CRM, specifically their contact information like email or phone number, because occasionally the AI can get those information wrong. And so if we can just use that information from the CRM directly without having to having to ask for that information, then it will not only save some time on the conversation, it will also make the conversation a lot more seamless and less error prone, since we are simply telling the user that this is their email and we are confirming it, but that's it. We don't need to ask for it all over again. And so if they don't need any additional help, then we're going to end the call, and that is basically the end of the flow. Now there are a few other really cool things that I would like to showcase you guys in the conversation flow. So I have showed you guys how to fine-tune a transition before, but besides fine-tuning the transition, we can actually also fine-tune the conversation of how the agent should say certain things. So for example, in this case, in the share order status step, initially I found that when the AI share this information, they share it in a very matter of fact, in a very rigid way, saying that okay, here's your order, order status this, location this, deliver status this, delivery date this, in a very mechanic way, which I don't like. So I basically provide an example of how the AI should say that sentence in a more natural way. So here I'm instructing them on how to provide the status information in a natural and casual way, and it really helps the conversation to become the way that I expect it to be. This is just a simple example. If we actually go to Retell documentation where they explain how the fine-tuning works, they provide a much more comprehensive example where you can basically specify the whole conversation from what the user say, what the agent say, and then what the user say, and then if a function is involved, then that function is called, then what kind of input it should accept and what kind of output it should return, and then how should you say that output, how should you relay that output back to the user. So you can really go into depth on how you fine-tune these examples. And I really like this because providing examples is actually something that I do all the time in traditional prompting with text, but obviously that makes the prompt much longer. Even though the examples might not apply to all the steps in the conversation, the AI still has to process all that prompt throughout the entire conversation. So instead of that, here Retell provides us with a way to provide specific examples for a specific step of the conversation, which is really, really great. And then next, if we look at the call transfer, I think this is actually a very underrated feature in Retell because of the extent of how we can customize the transfer. So first, a recent enhancement that Retell introduced is dynamic routing. So instead of just routing to a static number like it used to be, now we can actually prompt the AI to transfer the call dynamically. So for example, if they have a support issue, then we transfer to a specific number, whereas if they have an issue related to sales, then we transfer them to a different number, and so on. And so here we can really have fine-grained control over how the transfer works, depending on what the different situations that the user needs to transfer be, and we can specify the specific phone number for each of that scenario. In Retell, we can also choose which type of transfer we want to do. So a warm transfer is when the AI provides a debrief to the human agent after transferring the call. So in this case, I can instruct the AI to tell the human agent the user's name and the issue, so that the human agent on the line can know who they are speaking to and what the issue is. Or you can also do code transfer as well. So the AI just transfer the call over and then doesn't provide any context. And if you do that, Retell allows us to either display the phone number of the Retell agent or the phone number of the actual user, in case that is relevant to the kind of support required in certain businesses. And so here we can also set the transfer call node as a global node as well. So no matter where the user is in the conversation, as soon as they express that they want to speak to a human, then we can transfer them immediately to this node. And finally, with the end call nodes, there's not much going on here, but one thing to note is that in this node, the AI is not going to say anything. And so if we want the agent to say a farewell message, like a goodbye, then we would need to have a conversation node right before this to make the ending less abrupt and more natural, more polite. Okay, so now that we have looked at the conversation flow and how it works, let's take a look at the functions that are being triggered from this conversation. And our functions in this case is being set up in make.com, which is an automation platform. So the first function that we are going to look at is the function to retrieve the user's information from the CRM based on their phone number. So if you remember in the conversation that I had with the AI, as soon as the conversation begins, using my phone number, the AI was able to tell what my name is based on my phone number. And not only that, throughout the conversation, the AI was also able to refer to different information based on the CRM, based on the information about the customer in the CRM, such as the email to be sent the refund confirmation to. So in order to do that, first in the system prompt, we are going to define this information using dynamic variables. And then the second thing that we had to do is to set up an inbound webhook, which is what I'm setting up here. So basically what this does is that at the time of the call, Retell is going to send the phone number of the customer calling to this webhook. And then here in make.com, we are basically going to use the customer number that we got from Retell in order to query the database, basically looking for the customer's that has this phone number, which we will get a result of the entry for the user in the CRM with the name, the phone number, and customer email. And we basically send those information back to Retell so that Retell can use that in the prompt, in this case, in the conversation flow. And here you can see that I'm specifying the name, the phone number, and the email in the webhook response, which is exactly the same dynamic variables that I'm defining here in the prompt, as well as throughout the notes in the conversation flow. Next, we have the function to retrieve information about ongoing orders for an user based on their phone number. And so here, if we look at the function setup, we are specifying the webhook URL as well as the parameter that we are going to send to that webhook, which is the user's phone number in this case. So if we go to make.com, the scenario to retrieve orders is going to expect the phone number of the user, and then it's going to use that phone number in order to find the orders that are ongoing of the user. So you can see that I'm searching the orders for any orders that are associated with the customer with this phone number, and then I'm also checking the order status to only find the orders that have not been delivered yet, so it's an ongoing order. And then once we get back all that information about the orders, we are going to aggregate that into a JSON object, and we are going to send the whole thing back to Retell. So the Retell voice agent will have all the information about all the ongoing orders that the users has, and then it's going to use this information in the conversation, as you see. So for example, they can share the order status, where the order is, when it's expected to arrive, and so on. So all that information comes from this response here. And even though it looks very structured and rigid, Retell is smart enough to, based on our instructions that we provided in the note, to relay those same information, but in a very natural way. And then finally, we have the function to refund the orders for the users if the refund reason is justified. And similarly, here we are specifying the webhook URL, which comes from make.com as well as the parameters that is required for this operation to happen. In this case, we only need the ID of the order to be refunded, as well as the reason for the refund that we asked the user for during the conversation. And so we are going to send this information to this webhook, which is defined in make.com. So by the way, the webhook URL that you see in the functions being set up is the same as the URL that you can see in the make.com scenarios. And so here, in the case of the function to initiate the refund, we are going to receive as defined in the function the order ID as well as the reason for the refund. Then we are going to search the orders table in order to find that order so that we can update the order status to refund it. As you can see here, that is the order that I asked for a refund. And then it will also add a new row to the refund table, providing all of the information about the order, including the ID, the product name, and so on that we got from the orders table. And then add in some information related to the refund, such as the status, the process date, as well as the reason for the refund, which again we got directly from Retell. And then we also send an email, a confirmation email, to let the user know that their refund has been processed. And here we can reference the different variables that we got from the automation so far. So we have the email address of the user coming from the orders table, and then we also have the order ID that we can use in the email subject here. And then we can further personalize the email that we send to the user using their name, the product name, the order ID, all this, right? So by the end, we get an email that is personalized, looking like this. As usual, I will leave the templates for all these automations in the video description. Even though there are a lot that I like about Retell Conversation Flow, I think that there are certain projects where this kind of setup works better than others. So when the conversation is really complex and requires multiple different states and logical transitions like what you are seeing here, then I think it's very ideal to use the conversation flow. On the other hand, if the conversation is simple with very few different states and not a lot of transitions, the conversation is just sort of linear and not too long, then I think potentially it might be better to stick with the single prompt setup since it's much faster to set up. But yeah, I think it's important to pick the right tool for the job that you are doing specifically. And that's how you can build a complex and reliable AI voice agent using Retell AI new conversation flow. And I believe that as AI voice agents are adopted to handle more and more sophisticated use cases, workflow builder like conversation flow will be the way to go since it allows us much more fine-grained control over each step of the conversation. Personally, it was also the most fun that I ever had building an AI voice agent since I was able to structure and define the agent and the conversation that it's supposed to have using visual components like in a flow diagram, which makes it much more easily and also a lot more fascinating. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It would really mean a lot to me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay curious.